Anytime you're ready, Mr. Mitchell.
Greetings, everybody. Several months ago, Tomas Pettick alerted me that to get ready to be on YouTube, and I started with a wardrobe and bought the finest $25 suit that Goodwill had, and had a tie that was given me by a former student, and then I started to work on diction, and I studied how to win friends and influence people. And so I hope that I'm going to be qualified now to appear to a good advantage on YouTube. I started at the age of 4 as a piano student, and it was not voluntary, I assure you. It was my mother's idea, and she was an extremist, and it wasn't just sit down and practice, dear. She went to the lesson. I had a piano teacher at 4, and she wrote down every word that the teacher said, and then she sat down with me to practice an hour a day. They call it child abuse nowadays, but in those days they didn't have the welfare laws, I guess, and so I'm certainly glad that she did, but it was not my idea. So she'd say, go out in the orchard and get a little twig, take the leaves off. I had bare legs, and if I gave her a bad time, which I usually did, she'd switch my legs. But I must say that unlike a mother who might be alcoholic or have a violent temper, every time that she punished me, I never resented it because I knew I deserved it. So we had no problem on that score. In my childhood, there were no electronic organs, and the only pipe organs were in churches and synagogues, theaters, and millionaires' homes. And practicing was not allowed as a general practice. And people that wanted to learn the organ usually had to be college graduates in piano, and you could transfer the fingering and the musical terms and the interpretation and the history of music from the piano to the organ, and then you could concentrate on the pedals and on picking up the stops, and also on playing what's called legato smoothly. On the piano, you can take your hand off the key and hold the tone with your foot on a pedal, but on the organ, it's like a doorbell. If you take your hand off a key, it stops playing. So there's a particular technique in the organ. We often have to change the fingers on the same note to hold it down so that it will stay down as long as we need to hear it, and it won't come off. And usually an hour a week is about all you could get. You'd find an organist that had a concession to have 5 hours, and so you get 1 hour a week to take a lesson and learn. And so in the little village that we lived, there was only one pipe organ, and that was in the Episcopal church. And so my mother, when I was so advanced in the piano since 4 years old, when I was 10, I was tall for my age, and I could reach the pedals. So my mother was very religious, and she decided that she'd like to have me learn the organ. So I sort of dreaded it because I knew it'd mean another hour of practice, and some of the ladies in the village said, "Oh, Robert, don't have your mother start you with organ because that might spoil your piano touch." And both of them had friends that had played piano, and when they played only organ, they lost their piano touch. It is true, you have to have a lot more muscle and strength to play a piano, because the organ, it doesn't matter how hard you hit it or how softly you touch it, it never is makes no difference. So I told my mother, I love the piano, I don't want to spoil it. I thought I had her convinced. She said, "Is that so? I didn't know that would spoil your piano." "Well, now you're going to go take organ lessons." So she went down to the Episcopal church, and she asked the rector they called the pastor of an Episcopal church the rector, and he was a rather stuffy Canadian, Dean Shaw, and he used to say, "When I was dean of a large cathedral," and he'd go up and down on his heels in the pulpit, and in a little village everybody knows everybody's business, and the neighbor said he was never a dean of a cathedral. The dean was given wealthy members of the church gave him a trip to Israel where he could visit the Holy Land, and while they were away, he substituted for them. But at any rate, he retained the title Dean Shaw, and so my mother wanted to know if I could practice on the organ. He said, no one can play the organ but our organist. So my mother told him what she thought about a man of the cloth that wouldn't allow a child to learn the instrument used to praise Almighty God. Oh, she could be dramatic. He said, well, he'd make an exception in my case without setting a precedent. But he said I would have to study with their organist. Well, Mother's bubble was broken because she didn't have much respect for the local talent in the village. She had dreams of my studying with Ernest Douglas, considered the finest organ teacher in Southern California at the time. And so, at any rate, everything worked to my advantage. That seems to be my life. I have no plans, and just the things that look bad work out to my advantage. So the girl, Frances Webster, was the organist, and I was afraid of her, which was a big advantage. She had her hair pulled up in a knot on the back of her head, pencil behind her ear, and so I played a note with my foot, and it was wrong, and I looked at her and said, "Don't look at your feet!" And that scared me so much that to this day I'm afraid to look at my feet. And that's a big, big advantage. When I'm playing for a movie or I'm directing a choir, I can't look down on my feet any more than when you're driving a car, you can't look down at the clutch and the brake. You have to keep your eye on the road. And at any rate, I played, studied with her until she got married. And my first job, it wasn't professional because I wasn't paid, but I played for her wedding. And then she retired, and Mother had her dream come true, and I studied with Ernest Douglas. So he took me up to his church, St. Matthias Episcopal Church, used to be at the corner of Washington and Normandy. No, nothing there now, but they had to make a jog in the road for the freeway. But I hit a wrong note, and he said, "Well, look down at your feet." I said, "Oh, I wouldn't do that." So actually, I had better luck studying with the village organist than if I had never had that experience. So that was a wonderful happening for me. And then Mr. Douglas had a boys and men's choir, and my mother said, "It's not enough for you to take lessons from him. You must go and listen to him play and see how he performs." So every Sunday she drives 17 miles, a little Maxwell car, and the little tires. Always we could expect a blowout, either going or coming. And so he used to rehearse the men and boys choir before the service, and then he'd go down and then he'd play the organ, and then the choir would walk in singing. So I always went in and listened to the rehearsal and then watched the service. So one Sunday in the summer, he had only a few boys. He said, "Put on a robe and sing with the boys." Well, I loved to sing. We used to have phonograph records of Gali Curci and Alma Gluck and Geraldine Ferrar. I couldn't understand the words, but I'd make up words for the Italian or the French or German, and I love to sing, imitate those opera singers. But I mean, when he said sing with the boys, I said, "Oh, I can't sing." I was shy. He said, "Well, put on a robe and fill up space." So anyway, I went in and I started singing, a little bit with the boys, and they were street kids, hard-boiled, marvelous singers. They got 50 cents a week for Thursday afternoon rehearsal, Friday night rehearsal with the men, and 2 services on Sunday morning and evening. They didn't pay any attention to me, they sang magnificently. So I got more bold and I sang up with them. Pardon me. And I got, because I'd had so much music, I saw how he trained the boys. This was the days before radio, and they had, the news would come in headlines. There would be always a special edition, and the newsboys would be in the street and say, "Read all about it in the paper." So their voices were all the chest tone. In order to get them up to high C and all that, why, then he had a special technique. I'll stop.